March 15th, 1943. The Volkov front stretched across northwestern Russia like a frozen wound, where German and Soviet forces had ground each other down through two brutal winters. Near the village of Maga, temperatures plunged to minus 32 degrees Celsius. Ice crystals formed on metal surfaces within seconds, and exhaled breath created small clouds that lingered in the still air before dissipating into the gray dawn. Major Alexei Volkov of the 2nd Shock Army pressed his gloved fingers against the frosted window of the abandoned railway station. Through the condensation patterns, he observed the skeletal remains of what locals called the Muga Bridge, a strategic crossing over the Volkhov River that had changed hands 4 times since the German advance began in 1941. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts on what intrigues you most about this historical account. Volkov's unit had received orders 3 days prior to conduct reconnaissance of German positions along the eastern bank. Intelligence reports suggested the Wehrmacht had established a supply line across the frozen river, but Soviet aerial reconnaissance had detected unusual activity near the bridge's foundations. The major studied the deployment map spread across a makeshift table constructed from ammunition crates. The 378th Rifle Division had attempted to secure the crossing in January, resulting in casualties that reduced the unit to 60% strength. German defensive positions included concrete bunkers positioned on elevated ground overlooking the approach routes. Anti-tank obstacles and minefields created additional barriers for any advancing force. Corporal Ivan Medvedev entered the station through the damaged doorway, his boots crunching on broken glass scattered across the platform. His breath formed small puffs as he reported the completion of perimeter security checks. Medvedev carried a Mosin Nagant rifle and wore the standard-issue winter camouflage that had proven effective in previous reconnaissance missions. Volkov examined the intelligence photographs taken by reconnaissance aircraft 2 weeks earlier. The images revealed German engineers had constructed temporary structures near the bridge's western approach. Supply trucks appeared in several photographs, suggesting regular logistical operations despite the harsh conditions. The sound of distant artillery echoed across the frozen landscape, a constant reminder of the active front line positioned 12 kilometers to the south. Soviet Katyusha rockets had targeted German positions throughout the previous night, creating orange flashes visible on the horizon. Medvedev reported that local partisans had provided information about German patrol schedules. According to their observations, Wehrmacht units conducted regular sweeps of the area between 0800 and 1200 hours, followed by a reduced presence during afternoon hours. Volkov consulted his pocket watch. 0630 hours. The reconnaissance. Mission would commence at 0700, taking advantage of limited visibility conditions. Weather reports indicated heavy snowfall would begin by midday, providing natural concealment for withdrawal operations. The major's fingers traced the route marked on his map. The approach would follow a series of abandoned trenches constructed during the 1942 fighting, then cross open ground for approximately 400 meters before reaching observation positions overlooking the bridge. Sergeant Boris Kozlov arrived with additional intelligence gathered from intercepted radio transmissions. German communications referenced scheduled supply deliveries and personnel rotations. The information suggested increased activity planned for the following week. Volkov studied the bridge structure through binoculars. The central span had sustained damage from previous bombing raids, but the foundations appeared intact. German engineers had installed temporary supports to maintain structural integrity for vehicle crossings. Snow began falling in light flakes, accumulating on the windowsill and equipment surfaces. The precipitation would complicate visibility conditions, but provide additional camouflage for the reconnaissance team's movement across exposed terrain. Medvedev prepared equipment for the mission: compass, map case, signal flares, and additional ammunition. Each team member carried emergency rations sufficient for 72 hours, along with medical supplies and communication devices. The major reviewed final details with his subordinates. The primary objective involved documenting German defensive positions and supply operations. Secondary objectives included identifying potential weaknesses in enemy fortifications and assessing the feasibility of future offensive operations. Volkov examined the frozen river through his binoculars one final time before departure. Ice thickness measurements indicated the surface could support personnel movement but not heavy vehicles. German positions appeared quiet, with minimal visible activity in the early morning hours. At precisely 0700 hours, the reconnaissance team departed the railway station and began their careful advance toward the Muga Bridge. The snow continued falling, muffling their footsteps as they moved through the abandoned trenches toward their objective. Behind them, the empty station settled back into silence, while ahead lay the answers to questions that had puzzled Soviet intelligence for weeks. The bridge waited in the growing snowfall, its damaged structure holding secrets that would soon reshape their understanding of German operations in the sector. The first truck arrived at the Kirov Bridge construction site before dawn on December 15, 1941. Its cargo manifest listed cement and steel beams, but records later revealed additional materials, high-grade explosives, detonation wire, and specialized engineering equipment never requested by the bridge construction foreman. Sergei Volkov stepped down from the passenger seat, his military boots crunching against the fresh snow. The 34-year-old engineering captain had overseen 17 bridge demolitions during the Wehrmacht's advance toward Leningrad. This assignment differed fundamentally from his previous operations. Construction workers gathered around the delivery trucks, their breath forming white clouds in the -15-degree temperature. The bridge's concrete foundation extended 60 meters across the frozen Neva tributary, its steel framework rising 12 meters above the ice-covered water below. Volkov examined the architectural blueprints spread across a makeshift plywood table. The original construction timeline indicated completion by February 1942. His sealed orders, received directly from the Northwest Front Command, specified a different timeline entirely. The sound of diesel engines echoed across the construction zone as additional vehicles approached from the northern access road. Military transport trucks carried specialized personnel, demolition experts from the Leningrad Engineering Corps, communications specialists, and a team of civilian engineers whose presence remained unexplained in official documentation. According to intercepted German radio transmissions, Army Group North planned a renewed offensive toward Leningrad's southern approaches within 6 weeks. Intelligence reports indicated Wehrmacht reconnaissance units had identified the Kirov Bridge location as strategically significant for potential supply lines. Volkov's assistant, Lieutenant Pavel Kresnikov, distributed technical specifications to the assembled engineering teams. The documents outlined modification procedures that would transform the partially completed bridge into what military terminology classified as a prepared demolition target. Work crews began installing secondary support structures beneath the main span. These additions appeared consistent with standard reinforcement protocols, but their actual function served a different purpose, concealing explosive charges within the bridge's structural framework. The metallic scraping of tools against concrete created a constant background noise throughout the morning hours. Workers installed electrical conduits ostensibly for lighting systems, but the wiring specifications matched those used for remote detonation networks. Temperatures dropped further as afternoon approached, reaching -22 degrees Celsius. Ice formations developed along the bridge's exposed steel beams, creating additional camouflage for the concealed modifications being implemented throughout the structure. Volkov received an encrypted radio message at 1400 hours. The transmission originated from Northwest Front headquarters and contained updated intelligence regarding German patrol activity in the immediate vicinity. Reconnaissance flights had photographed the construction site twice during the previous 72 hours. Civilian workers completed their scheduled shifts and departed the site by 1600 hours, following standard construction protocols. Military personnel remained, continuing specialized installations under the cover of routine maintenance activities. The sound of aircraft engines became audible around 1730 hours. A single Luftwaffe reconnaissance plane circled the construction area at high altitude, its cameras presumably documenting the bridge's apparent progress toward completion. Kresnikov coordinated with communications personnel to establish secure radio contact with forward observation posts positioned along the tributary's eastern bank. These positions would provide real-time intelligence regarding any approaching forces during nighttime hours. Documents recovered after the war indicated that German military planners had identified the Kirov Bridge location as a priority target for capture rather than destruction. Wehrmacht engineers considered the crossing essential for establishing supply routes to support extended operations in the Leningrad sector. Volkov's engineering team completed the final preparations by 2100 hours, External inspection revealed no obvious modifications to the bridge's appearance. The structure maintained its original architectural profile while concealing the extensive preparations installed throughout its framework. Radio operators established contact with 3 separate observation units positioned at strategic intervals along the tributary. Each team reported clear visibility conditions and no signs of enemy movement in their designated sectors. The temperature continued dropping as midnight approached, reaching -26 degrees Celsius. Fresh snowfall began at 2:30 hours, creating additional concealment for the prepared positions surrounding the bridge site. Volkov reviewed the final operational checklist with his subordinates. Every system had been tested and verified operational. The bridge appeared completed and functional to external observation, while remaining prepared for immediate destruction upon receipt of authorization codes. Radio communications with Northwest Front headquarters confirmed the operational timeline remained unchanged. The bridge would maintain its apparent construction status while serving its concealed secondary function until circumstances required activation of the prepared demolition systems. At 23:55 hours, forward observers reported movement along the western approach roads. Multiple vehicle lights were advancing toward the bridge location through the falling snow, their precise composition and intentions remaining unidentified in the darkness, beyond the observation post's effective range. The reconnaissance photographs spread across Colonel Petrov's desk revealed disturbing patterns. Taken during the brief daylight hours of February 15, 1943, the images showed unusual traffic formations approaching the buried Dnieper crossing near Kremenchuk. Intelligence reports indicated German forces had somehow detected the concealed passage, despite the elaborate camouflage efforts. Senior Lieutenant Mikhail Volkov studied the aerial shots with growing concern. Vehicle tracks appeared in the snow, forming deliberate lines that converged toward the hidden bridge location. The metallic gleam of steel cables, barely visible beneath the white surface, caught winter sunlight at precise angles that suggested enemy knowledge of the structure's exact positioning. According to intercepted radio transmissions, Wehrmacht reconnaissance units had been conducting systematic searches along the frozen riverbank for 3 consecutive nights. Local partisan networks reported increased German patrols in villages downstream from the crossing point. The enemy appeared to be methodically mapping Soviet supply routes that utilized the submerged infrastructure. Documents recovered from captured German officers indicated their forces had developed new detection methods specifically designed to locate concealed river crossings. These techniques involved acoustic monitoring equipment that could identify the distinctive sound patterns created by heavy vehicles traversing steel frameworks beneath ice and snow cover. The resonance created by tank treads on buried metal beams produced frequencies detectable by sensitive listening devices positioned along riverbanks. Major Dmitry Kozlov received orders to implement enhanced security measures around the crossing zone. His engineering battalion had successfully maintained the illusion of an impassable river section for nearly 2 months, but the increasing enemy activity threatened to expose their carefully constructed deception. The bridge remained vital for nighttime supply operations that sustained 3 infantry divisions positioned across the Dnieper. Weather conditions during mid-February provided both advantages and complications for defensive preparations. Heavy snowfall continued to mask visual evidence of the crossing, but the same precipitation created acoustic conditions that allowed sounds to travel further across the frozen landscape. Each vehicle that crossed during darkness produced vibrations that carried through the ice structure, potentially alerting German listening posts established in nearby forest positions. Soviet engineers worked throughout daylight hours to modify the bridge's acoustic signature. They installed rubber matting along vehicle pathways and adjusted support cables to reduce resonant frequencies. Additional snow was manually distributed across suspicious areas where tire tracks or equipment marks might reveal activity patterns to enemy observation aircraft. Intelligence sources within occupied territories provided crucial information about German intentions regarding the crossing. Local civilians reported seeing specialized detection equipment being transported toward the river sector. These devices included sensitive microphones designed to monitor subsurface activity and infrared sensors capable of detecting heat signatures from recently used vehicle routes. The tactical situation demanded immediate adjustments to operational procedures. Supply convoys received instructions to alter their crossing schedules, creating irregular patterns that would complicate enemy prediction efforts. Vehicle loads were redistributed to minimize the weight concentration that produced the most detectable vibrations. Drivers underwent additional training and techniques designed to reduce noise generation during transit across the concealed structure. Communication protocols established between the crossing command post and forward observation positions enabled real-time monitoring of German activities. Radio operators maintained constant surveillance of enemy frequencies, listening for any indication that the Wehrmacht had definitively located the hidden bridge. Partisan units received orders to increase sabotage operations against German supply lines, creating diversions that might redirect enemy attention from the river crossing area. By February 18th, the situation had escalated significantly. German forces positioned artillery batteries within range of the suspected crossing zone and began conducting systematic bombardment patterns designed to test for concealed structures. The shelling followed a methodical grid system that would eventually encompass the bridge's actual location if continued according to the observed sequence. Colonel Petrov faced a critical decision regarding the crossing's future viability. Maintaining the deception required increasingly complex countermeasures that diverted resources from other essential operations. However, abandoning the route would force Soviet supply lines to utilize longer, more vulnerable paths that exposed convoys to sustained enemy interdiction efforts. The metallic gleam of cables beneath the snow had become both salvation and potential doom for thousands of soldiers depending on continuous resupply operations across the frozen Dnieper. The first reconnaissance team returned empty-handed on February 18th. Lieutenant Kozlov reported nothing unusual at the buried structure, only pristine snow layers that showed no signs of recent disturbance. The metal detector readings remained inconsistent, fluctuating between silence and sporadic beeps that led nowhere. Commander Petrov studied the topographical map spread across his field desk. The bridge's original specifications indicated a span of 42 meters, constructed in 1941 to facilitate supply movements across the frozen tributary. Military archives confirmed its deliberate burial under controlled avalanche conditions in November 1942, when German reconnaissance aircraft increased their surveillance flights over the sector. Major Volkov arrived with additional equipment on the morning of February 19th. His engineering unit brought specialized probing rods and seismic detection devices designed to map subsurface structures. The temperature had dropped to minus 28 degrees Celsius, creating optimal conditions for ground penetration testing. The seismic readings revealed something unexpected. The buried bridge structure extended deeper than architectural plans suggested, with additional support beams and what appeared to be secondary chambers beneath the main span. Volkov's instruments detected hollow spaces that military engineers hadn't documented in the original construction reports. Local partisan records, recovered from a cache discovered near Vyborg, provided crucial context. Documents dated December 1942 mentioned unusual movement patterns around the buried crossing point. Resistance fighters had observed Soviet supply columns approaching the area during midnight hours, despite official reports stating the route remained permanently closed. The partisan logs described a systematic pattern. Every 3 weeks, military vehicles would arrive at the burial site after 2,300 hours. The convoys consisted of 2 covered trucks and an escort vehicle, always following identical approach routes through the dense forest surrounding the tributary. The operations concluded before dawn, leaving no visible traces of activity. Weather station records from the period corroborated these observations. Temperature fluctuations during those specific nights showed localized warming patterns consistent with human activity and vehicular heat signatures. The meteorological data indicated sustained presence at the site for periods ranging from 2 to 4 hours. Senior Lieutenant Marchenko's investigation team discovered additional evidence on February 20th. Soil analysis revealed traces of engine oil and rubber compounds buried 18 centimeters below the current snow line. Chemical composition matched Soviet military vehicle specifications from the 1942 to 1943 period, confirming sustained mechanized activity at the location. The breakthrough came when engineers located the original access ramps. Despite 4 years under snow and natural sedimentation, the approach routes remained structurally intact. Metal detection equipment identified buried guide rails and wooden reinforcement beams that extended beyond the documented bridge boundaries. Archival research in Leningrad military headquarters revealed classified transportation logs from the winter of 1942. The documents, previously marked as routine supply manifests, showed recurring entries for Special Cargo Transport, Route Delta 7. The coordinates corresponded exactly to the buried bridge location. Route Delta 7 operations involved 3 vehicle convoys departing from the Kirov ammunition depot. Cargo descriptions remained deliberately vague. Priority materials, strategic reserves, and command-designated supplies. The manifests listed departure times between 22:30 and 2300 hours, with estimated return schedules before 0500 hours. Captain Fedorov's security review identified the pattern's strategic significance. The buried bridge provided covert access to supply caches positioned beyond German reconnaissance range. The midnight timing avoided enemy aerial surveillance while utilizing optimal conditions for heavy vehicle movement across frozen ground. Local population interviews conducted by military intelligence officers yielded consistent testimonies. Villagers from the nearby settlement of Malye Kolomyagi recalled hearing mechanical sounds during winter nights in 1942 and early 1943. The noises occurred with remarkable regularity, suggesting organized military operations rather than random activity. The villagers described a distinctive acoustic signature, the rumble of diesel engines followed by metallic grinding sounds that lasted several hours. One elderly resident, Maria Gromova, specifically remembered the sound of heavy machinery operating beneath snow cover, creating what she described as muffled thunder from underground. Documentary evidence from German intelligence archives, captured during the Battle of Berlin, confirmed Allied suspicions about the buried bridge's continued use. Wehrmacht reconnaissance reports from early 1943 noted unexplained supply improvements in Soviet positions, despite successful interdiction of known transportation routes. The German documents referenced phantom supply lines that enabled Soviet forces to maintain ammunition and equipment levels beyond expected capabilities. Intelligence analysts had identified the approximate region but failed to locate specific transportation infrastructure that remained operational despite aerial bombing campaigns. By February 21st, the investigation team had assembled a comprehensive timeline of events. The buried bridge had served as a concealed supply route for approximately 6 months, facilitating critical resource movement during the siege's most desperate phase. The midnight operations represented one of the war's most successful deception campaigns. Commander Petrov prepared his preliminary report for Moscow headquarters. The evidence supported conclusions that would reshape understanding of Soviet logistical capabilities during the Leningrad siege. The buried bridge hadn't been abandoned. It had been transformed into a strategic asset that operated in complete secrecy. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted his documentation work. 3 military trucks emerged from the forest, following the exact route described in the partisan records. The convoy maintained the precise timing pattern documented in the historical evidence. 23:47 hours, February 21st, 1946. The sound of metal scraping against frozen concrete echoed through the dawn air as Soviet engineers resumed their work on February 14th, 1943. Steam rose from their breath in the -30 temperature as they maneuvered heavy steel beams into position. The bridge across the Neva tributary had been under construction for 6 weeks, a vital supply line for the besieged city of Leningrad. Colonel Dmitry Volkov watched from the eastern embankment, his field glasses trained on the German observation posts 3 kilometers south. Intelligence reports indicated increased enemy activity along the sector, but construction could not stop. The city's survival depended on this crossing. Work crews had discovered something during the night shift. Beneath the accumulated snow and ice, remnants of an older structure emerged. Wooden pilings from a previous bridge, destroyed during the initial German advance in September 1941. The discovery forced engineers to modify their foundation plans, but also revealed something else: a partially collapsed tunnel system running beneath the riverbed. Senior Lieutenant Mikhail Petrov descended into the excavated area with his survey team. Their torches illuminated stone archways dating back decades, possibly predating the revolution. The tunnel extended in both directions along the riverbank, its purpose unclear from available records. Military archives contain no reference to such infrastructure in this location. Petrov's team documented the findings methodically. The tunnel measured approximately 2 meters in height and 1.5 meters in width. Construction appeared solid despite years of abandonment. Water damage was minimal due to the structure's elevation above the river's normal flood level. Most significantly, the tunnel provided a concealed route between both banks. By midday, Volkov received Petrov's preliminary report. The discovery presented tactical opportunities that had not existed in previous assessments. A concealed crossing beneath the new bridge could facilitate covert operations behind German lines. However, utilizing the tunnel would require extensive clearing and reinforcement work. German artillery opened fire at 13:47 hours, targeting the construction site with systematic precision. Workers scattered to prepared positions along the embankments as shells impacted the frozen ground. The bombardment lasted 47 minutes, destroying 2 cranes and damaging approximately 60 meters of completed bridge work. Volkov established his command post in a reinforced bunker overlooking the site. Radio communications with Leningrad Front headquarters confirmed that German forces had detected the construction project. Enemy reconnaissance flights had increased over the past 3 days, providing targeting intelligence for the artillery strikes. Construction resumed under cover of darkness. Work crews operated in complete blackout conditions, guided only by hooded torches and tactile navigation. The tunnel discovery remained classified, known only to senior engineering staff and command personnel. Petrov's detailed survey would continue during night operations when German observation was limited. Snow began falling at 200 hours, heavy flakes that accumulated rapidly on the construction equipment. Weather reports predicted continued snowfall through the following day, potentially providing natural concealment for the operation. The irony was not lost on the engineering teams. The same snow that complicated their work also protected them from enemy detection. Petrov's second survey revealed additional tunnel branches extending further inland on both sides of the river. The eastern branch appeared to connect with basement foundations of buildings destroyed during the siege's early months. The western branch disappeared into collapsed rubble, its terminus unclear without extensive excavation. Volkov studied the tunnel schematics by candlelight in his bunker. The underground network offered possibilities beyond simple troop movement. Supply caches could be established at key points, communications equipment installed, even medical facilities for wounded personnel. But such utilization would require approval from higher command levels. A courier arrived at 30 hours carrying orders from General Govorov's headquarters. The bridge construction was to be completed within 72 hours, regardless of enemy action. Additional engineering units would arrive by dawn to accelerate the timeline. The courier carried no knowledge of the tunnel discovery. Volkov faced a critical decision. Revealing the tunnel to higher command would likely result in immediate requisition for intelligence operations, potentially compromising the bridge project's timeline. Concealing the discovery violated reporting protocols but maintained operational security for both projects. The colonel walked through the falling snow to the bridge site, observing night shift workers positioning support cables despite the deteriorating conditions. Their dedication reminded him of Leningrad's resilience throughout the siege. Every project, every operation contributed to the city's survival. At the tunnel entrance, Petrov emerged from his third survey expedition. His equipment was covered in ice crystals, but his expression indicated significant findings. The tunnel system was more extensive than initially assessed, with multiple chambers suitable for equipment storage or personnel shelter. Volkov made his decision as the snowfall intensified around them. The tunnel would remain an engineering project, documented but not reported to intelligence services until the bridge construction was complete. Both projects would proceed simultaneously, each supporting the other's success. By midnight, the snow had buried most evidence of the day's construction activity. Only the partially completed bridge towers remained visible above the white blanket covering the site. Beneath the accumulating snow, 2 separate but connected projects continued their race against time and enemy detection. The recurring sound of metal scraping concrete resumed in the darkness, now joined by the muffled sounds of excavation from below. Both the visible and hidden construction proceeded toward their respective completions, each carrying implications for the siege's outcome. The engine noise from the approaching convoy grew distinct against the winter silence. Colonel Petrov adjusted his field glasses, watching 3 GIS-67 vehicles navigate the winding approach road through the trees. Steam rose from their radiators in the -30 temperature. Behind him, Lieutenant Kozlov secured the final demolition charges beneath the concrete spans. Documents recovered from the captured German reconnaissance team indicated enemy forces had identified the bridge's strategic value. Wehrmacht intelligence reports, translated by division headquarters, revealed detailed sketches of the crossing points and adjacent defensive positions. The enemy planned to use this route for a flanking maneuver against Soviet positions 15 kilometers east. Kozlov emerged from beneath the structure, his uniform caked with concrete dust and ice crystals. The lieutenant reported the placement complete, 16 kilograms of TNT distributed across the main support beams. The detonation system included both electrical and manual backup triggers, following standard engineering protocol for critical infrastructure denial. The convoy reached the bridge perimeter at 11:47 hours. Major General Volkov stepped from the lead vehicle, accompanied by 2 staff officers from the 14th Guards Army. His presence signified the operation's elevated priority within the broader defensive strategy. The general's aide carried sealed orders bearing the distinctive red wax seal of the front command. Volkov examined the prepared demolition points, noting the precise placement of charges. He questioned Petrov about the timeline for complete destruction. The colonel explained that total collapse would require 47 minutes from initiation, based on structural calculations provided by the engineering battalion. This time frame would prevent enemy utilization while preserving materials for potential reconstruction. The conversation shifted to civilian considerations. Intelligence reports indicated approximately 200 local residents remained in the village on the bridge's eastern approach. These families had refused evacuation orders, citing elderly relatives unable to withstand the harsh journey to designated relocation areas. The general acknowledged this complication, but emphasized military necessity. Wind patterns carried the metallic scraping sounds of tracked vehicles from the western forest line. German mechanized units had advanced closer than previous estimates suggested. Radio communications from forward observation posts reported enemy infantry probing defensive positions along the river's northern bank. The tactical situation demanded immediate action. Petrov received final authorization to proceed with the demolition sequence. The formal order, signed by Front Command, specified the bridge's destruction must occur before 1400 hours. This deadline would prevent German forces from establishing a crossing point during the approaching night operations window. Kozlov began the electrical system verification, testing connections between the main charges and the command post detonator. The system functioned properly, displaying green status indicators on the control panel. Manual backup systems remained accessible should the primary method fail during execution. The general's aide distributed written instructions to all personnel present. These documents outlined post-demolition procedures, including fallback positions and communication protocols with higher command. Each officer acknowledged receipt of his specific responsibilities within the coordinated withdrawal plan. At 12:37 hours, enemy artillery began ranging shots against Soviet positions north of the bridge. The bombardment pattern suggested preparation for an infantry assault within 2 hours. German forward observers had established firing solutions for key defensive points, indicating thorough reconnaissance of the operational area. Major General Volkov departed with his staff, leaving final execution authority with Colonel Petrov. The convoy vehicles disappeared into the forest, following predetermined routes to avoid enemy observation. Radio silence protocols took effect immediately, restricting communications to emergency frequencies only. Petrov positioned his men at calculated distances from the target structure. The blast radius calculations indicated safe observation points at 300 meters minimum. Each soldier carried personal equipment sufficient for the 20-kilometer withdrawal march to secondary positions. The colonel checked his chronometer, 13:14 hours. 46 minutes remained until the mandatory execution deadline. Weather conditions remained stable, with visibility exceeding 2 kilometers despite intermittent snow flurries. These factors supported successful demolition operations without meteorological complications. German small arms fire erupted from positions west of the river. Soviet outposts returned fire, engaging enemy reconnaissance elements attempting to approach the bridge approaches. The exchange lasted 11 minutes before German forces withdrew to covered positions among the tree line. At 13:47 hours, Petrov initiated the final countdown sequence. Lieutenant Kozlov confirmed all personnel had reached minimum safe distances. The electrical detonation system displayed ready status across all connected charges. Manual backup remained prepared for immediate activation if required. The colonel's finger moved toward the primary trigger mechanism. 13 minutes remained before the deadline established by front command. German engine sounds grew louder from the western approach road, indicating enemy forces had begun their anticipated advance toward the crossing point. The bridge stood silent in the winter afternoon, its concrete spans covered with accumulated snow. Soon, nothing would remain except twisted metal and rubble scattered across the frozen riverbed. The strategic crossing would become impassable, forcing enemy forces to seek alternate routes through more heavily defended terrain. The metallic scraping of shovels against frozen concrete echoed through the pre-dawn darkness of February 15, 1904. Soviet engineers worked in calculated silence along the Narva River, their breaths forming dense clouds that dissipated into the Baltic wind. The temperature held steady at -18 degrees Celsius, optimal conditions for what Colonel Dmitry Volkov had termed Operation Phantom Bridge. According to intercepted German communications, Wehrmacht reconnaissance flights had photographed the stone railway bridge 3 days prior. Intelligence reports confirmed enemy units were repositioning to exploit what they believed was a strategic river crossing. The Soviets had other plans. Volkov supervised the placement of wooden framework beneath the genuine bridge structure. His engineering background from the Leningrad Technical Institute proved invaluable as teams positioned support beams to create the illusion of structural collapse. Snow machines operated by the 47th Pioneer Battalion worked methodically, depositing layers of artificial powder over the framework until the bridge appeared completely buried under natural accumulation. The deception required precision timing. Weather reports indicated sustained snowfall would continue for 48 hours, providing natural camouflage for the operation. Artillery units from the 59th Army had positioned howitzers along the eastern riverbank, their barrels trained on predetermined coordinates. The trap was nearly complete. Reconnaissance photographs taken by Lieutenant Alexei Petrov's aerial unit showed the bridge's transformation. From above, the crossing appeared impassable, buried under 3 meters of snowdrift. German intelligence would likely conclude the route was unusable until spring thaw. This miscalculation would prove costly. Local Estonian civilians had been evacuated from surrounding villages 3 days earlier, officially for their protection from anticipated bombardment. Unofficial reports suggested some residents had collaborated with German forces, providing intelligence on Soviet defensive positions. The evacuation eliminated potential security risks while maintaining operational secrecy. By nightfall on February 16th, the artificial snow barrier was complete. Engineer teams had installed these hidden observation posts along the western bank, equipped with field telephones connected to artillery command. The metallic taste of snow hung in the air as final preparations concluded. Soviet records indicate the first test of the deception occurred at 200 hours on February 17th. A German patrol approached the bridge site under cover of darkness, likely conducting advance reconnaissance for a planned crossing. The buried structure appeared completely impassable from their position. Radio intercepts confirmed the patrol reported the bridge as destroyed. Volkov received confirmation of the deception's success through encrypted communications. German forces had begun concentrating troops at alternative crossing points, 15 kilometers north and south of the buried bridge. This redistribution of enemy strength was precisely what Soviet planners had anticipated. The colonel examined intelligence photographs showing German supply convoys moving toward the alternate positions. Transport trucks carried engineering equipment and pontoon bridge sections, indicating preparations for river crossing operations. Wehrmacht commanders had taken the bait completely. Meanwhile, beneath the artificial snow barrier, Soviet combat engineers maintained the genuine bridge structure in perfect operational condition. Hidden ventilation shafts prevented ice formation on critical support points. The crossing remained fully functional, invisible to enemy observation. Temperature readings continued favoring the operation. The sustained cold snap preserved the artificial snow covering while preventing natural thaw that might expose the deception. Weather conditions would hold for at least another week, according to meteorological forecasts. Petrov's reconnaissance flights documented increased German activity at the alternate crossing sites. Enemy engineers had begun assembling temporary bridges, concentrating their resources precisely where Soviet artillery waited in concealed positions. The redistribution of German forces was proceeding exactly according to plan. On February 19th, intelligence reports confirmed German preparations for coordinated river crossings at both alternate sites. Wehrmacht planners had allocated significant resources to these operations, including tank support and air cover. The buried bridge site remained unguarded, considered impassable. Volkov's final preparations involved positioning assault troops in hidden bunkers near the genuine bridge. The 334th Rifle Regiment had moved into position during nighttime hours, their movements masked by natural snowfall. 300 soldiers waited in underground shelters, ready to emerge when ordered. The metallic sound of loading mechanisms echoed softly through the bunkers as soldiers prepared their equipment. Rifles were cleaned and oiled to prevent freezing. Ammunition was distributed according to predetermined allocation plans. Everything depended on precise timing. Radio operators maintained constant communication with higher command, reporting German movement patterns every 2 hours. The Wehrmacht continued concentrating forces at the decoy crossing points, leaving their rear positions increasingly vulnerable to surprise attack. By February 20th, the trap was fully set. German forces had committed substantial resources to crossing operations at sites where Soviet artillery waited in ambush. The buried bridge remained invisible, its artificial snow covering intact. Midnight approached, bringing with it the moment of truth for Operation Phantom Bridge. Volkov checked his chronometer, 23:55 hours. In 5 minutes, the artificial snow barrier would be removed, revealing the perfectly functional crossing. Soviet assault troops would emerge from their hidden positions to exploit the strategic advantage their deception had created. The bridge that never was would become the key to victory. March 15th, 1942. Dawn breaks over the Kalinin region with crystalline precision, each snowflake catching the pale sunlight like fragments of broken glass. The temperature reads -18 degrees Celsius. Soviet engineers emerge from their bunkers, their breath forming small clouds that dissipate quickly in the dry air. Colonel Dmitry Volkov stands at the edge of what was once a strategic crossing point. The Volga tributary runs below, its surface frozen solid. Where the Berezhny Bridge once connected the eastern and western banks, only subtle undulations in the snow reveal the buried structure beneath. The massive concrete pylons, steel girders, and wooden planking lie entombed under 3 meters of accumulated snow and ice. Major Alexei Petrov approaches with a leather satchel containing reconnaissance photographs. According to field reports, German advance units have been probing this sector for the past 72 hours. Intelligence suggests enemy forces remain unaware that a functional bridge exists beneath the frozen landscape. The camouflage operation, implemented over the previous 4 months, appears successful. Petrov spreads aerial photographs across a makeshift table constructed from ammunition crates. The images show German reconnaissance aircraft have photographed this section of the river 17 times since January. In each frame, the crossing point appears as an uninterrupted expanse of snow-covered terrain. No visible infrastructure suggests the possibility of rapid deployment across the waterway. Volkov examines the photographs through a magnifying glass. Weather reports indicate temperatures will remain below freezing for another 6 weeks. The bridge structure, designed to support tank columns, remains intact beneath its frozen shroud. Soviet forces have maintained secret access points at both ends, concealed within natural terrain features and camouflage supply depots. The strategic value becomes clear through logistical analysis. German forces advancing from the southwest face a 40-kilometer detour to reach the nearest confirmed crossing. This detour adds approximately 6 hours to any flanking maneuver, providing Soviet defenders crucial time to reposition artillery and establish defensive lines. The hidden bridge represents a tactical advantage that could determine the outcome of the entire sector. Field reports document German patrol activities throughout the previous week. Enemy reconnaissance teams have approached within 500 meters of the buried crossing without detecting the concealed infrastructure. Soviet observation posts, positioned in camouflaged positions along both riverbanks, have tracked these movements without engagement. The deception operation continues to function as intended. Petrov opens a second folder containing engineering assessments. The bridge construction, completed in October 1941, utilized reinforced concrete foundations, extending 4 meters below the riverbed. Steel suspension cables, treated with anti-corrosion compounds, maintain structural integrity despite prolonged exposure to moisture and freezing temperatures. Load-bearing calculations confirm the structure can support T-34 tanks and heavy artillery pieces. Soviet engineers developed the concealment strategy following analysis of German aerial reconnaissance patterns. Intelligence officers identified consistent flight paths and photography schedules, allowing precise timing of camouflage operations. Work crews operated exclusively during nighttime hours, using minimal lighting and sound discipline protocols. The artificial snow accumulation process required 12 weeks of methodical application. Volkov reviews deployment scenarios with his staff officers. Soviet forces positioned on the eastern bank include 2 tank companies, 3 infantry battalions, and supporting artillery units. These formations remain concealed in prepared positions approximately 2 kilometers from the riverbank. Communications networks utilize buried telephone cables that connect all units to central command posts. The deception extends beyond visual camouflage to include false intelligence operations. Soviet radio operators broadcast misleading communications designed for German interception. These transmissions suggest engineering difficulties and construction delays at alternative crossing sites. Counterintelligence assessments indicate German forces have accepted this disinformation as accurate battlefield intelligence. Meteorological data supports continued concealment effectiveness. Snowfall accumulation rates average 15 centimeters per week throughout the winter period. Natural wind patterns help distribute additional snow across the bridge structure, maintaining the illusion of uninterrupted terrain. Temperature fluctuations remain insufficient to cause significant melting or structural exposure. Petrov presents the final operational assessment. German forces in this sector total approximately 8,000 personnel, including mechanized infantry, armor, and support elements. Soviet forces defending the region number roughly 12,000, with additional reserves available from adjacent sectors. The concealed bridge provides options for counterattack operations and strategic redeployment. Field commanders report increasing German pressure along established defensive lines. Enemy artillery bombardments have intensified over the previous 48 hours, suggesting preparation for major offensive operations. German tanks have been observed moving closer to forward positions, indicating potential assault preparations within the next 72 hours. Volkov makes the critical decision. Soviet forces will maintain the deception until German units commit to their flanking maneuver around the presumed obstacle. At the predetermined moment, engineers will rapidly clear access points and deploy crossing equipment. The timing must coordinate precisely with counterattack operations to maximize tactical surprise. Engineering teams receive final preparation orders. Demolition charges positioned throughout the artificial snow barriers can clear the bridge approaches within 15 minutes. Pre-positioned equipment includes mobile ramps, guide vehicles, and temporary roadway sections. All materials remain hidden beneath camouflaged covers adjacent to the crossing site. Soviet artillery observers occupy concealed positions with clear sight lines across the entire river valley. Fire control procedures have been rehearsed extensively, with predetermined target coordinates for expected German approach routes. Communications protocols ensure rapid coordination between artillery, infantry, and armored units during the execution phase. The final intelligence briefing arrives via encrypted radio transmission. German forces have initiated movement toward the anticipated flanking route. Lead elements include reconnaissance vehicles and advance guard infantry. Main force deployment appears scheduled for the following day, with tank columns and heavy equipment following established timeline projections. March 16, 1942, 0347 hours. German reconnaissance vehicles approach the decoy crossing site 40 kilometers upstream. Soviet observers track the movement through field glasses and report via radio to command positions. The deception operation enters its final phase as enemy forces commit to the extended route around the presumed obstacle. Volkov authorizes bridge preparation procedures. Engineering teams emerge from concealed positions and begin clearing operations. Explosive charges detonate in carefully timed sequences, removing accumulated snow and ice from critical structural points. The sound echoes across the frozen landscape, masked by natural wind patterns and distant artillery fire. Within 12 minutes, the Berezhny Bridge stands revealed in the pale morning light. Its concrete spans stretch across the dark water, offering immediate passage for Soviet armored forces. The structure appears solid and functional, showing no signs of the prolonged concealment period. Support cables gleam with frost, but load-bearing elements remain uncompromised. Soviet tank engines roar to life in the pre-dawn darkness. T-34s emerge from camouflaged positions and advance toward the bridge approaches. Infantry units follow in established formation, their equipment prepared for rapid deployment. Artillery pieces move into position to provide covering fire for the crossing operation. The first tank reaches the bridge deck at WWII 59 hours. Its tracks grip the prepared surface as the massive vehicle crosses the span without hesitation. Additional armor follows at prescribed intervals, maintaining proper spacing and tactical formation. The crossing proceeds with mechanical precision, each unit executing predetermined movements. German forces, committed to their lengthy detour, receive reports of unexpected Soviet activity in their rear areas. Radio transmissions indicate confusion and hasty attempts to redirect tactical operations. The time delay inherent in their chosen route prevents rapid response to the developing situation. Soviet infantry completes the crossing by 04:15 hours. Artillery pieces follow, their crews implementing rapid deployment procedures upon reaching the western bank. Communications teams establish forward command posts and coordinate with advancing units. The tactical surprise achieves complete success. Colonel Volkov crosses the bridge at 04:28 hours, his command vehicle joining the advancing column. Behind him, the Berezhny Bridge returns to normal operation, its concealment phase concluded. The structure that spent 4 months buried beneath artificial snow now serves its intended military purpose. By 0600 hours, Soviet forces have established defensive positions on the western bank and begun advancing toward German rear areas. The tactical advantage gained through the deception operation translates into strategic initiative across the entire sector. German forces find themselves caught between advancing Soviet units and their original defensive commitments. Post-action reports document the operation's complete success. German intelligence failed to detect the concealed bridge throughout the winter period. The tactical surprise disrupted enemy plans and provided Soviet forces with decisive advantages in subsequent engagements. The Berezhny Bridge deception becomes a model for similar operations in other sectors. March 20th, 1942. The river crossing returns to routine military traffic. Supply convoys and reinforcement units utilize the bridge without interruption. The artificial snow barriers have been completely removed, leaving no trace of the elaborate concealment operation. What crossed at midnight during those winter months was the constant movement of Soviet forces maintaining their positions, preparing for the moment when tactical deception would transform into strategic victory.